Dr. Alhajji, thank you so much for doing this. It's great to meet you.
Pleased to meet you. Thank you.
You know, the timing of these conversations, I really think things happen for a reason. They happen when they're supposed to happen. I'm in Virginia right now. I've been here for almost a week. And one of the things that I've been told in driving around here, and I'm really close to DC in Northern Virginia, there are data centers apparently all over the place. I don't know exactly what that means all over the place, but they're just sitting here because they don't have the energy currently to utilize them. And it's amazing. Like, are you aware of this?
Yes, when it comes to AI and energy, this is kind of like we can write books on this. But let me start by saying this, that if as our incomes increase, and when we say our, we are talking about humans worldwide. Let's say my income or your income doubles by tomorrow. We are not going to eat double. We are not going to wear double shirts or double suit just because our income doubles. We are not going to drive two cars at once because our incomes double. We are not going to live in two houses just because our incomes double. But there are things that are going to increase with income. One of them basically is we always look for comfort. And again, I'm talking about the world. We are not talking about only the United States. And when we look for comfort, what we are looking for, you don't like heat in Arizona, you want air conditioning. You don't like heat in Nigeria, you want air conditioning. And air conditioning consumes a lot of energy. And then you look at other luxuries in life. When we talk about smartphones, when you look at computers, etc., other things, everything that is related to that comfort. And AI is part of that comfort. And whether for businesses or people, companies, government, etc. So as our incomes increase, basically, we are going to consume more data than ever. And one thing, of course, we consume is health services. And if you come to someone who has, let's say, $50 billion and tell them, I can extend your life by 1 year or 2 years, how much you pay for that? So you can see where the expenditures as incomes increase will go. But one thing is clear, that our consumption of data will increase exponentially regardless. And that includes AI and that includes data centers. One of the problems we have is that all of them are energy consumers and they consume energy substantially. So what are the implications? The implications basically are extremely significant. For one, if we don't have new energy sources coming to the system to supply electricity, then we are going to see competition between data centers and people, between what your children are going to do and what Microsoft is going to do. And we are going to end up with a clash. And then someone is going to call their senators or congressmen and basically tell them, look, I don't have power because Microsoft took that energy from me. And then there will be backlash against the industry. So there is a lot of pressure right now on government, on politicians, on the industry, basically, to increase energy supplies. And here's the problem. We just came out of a Biden era, and years earlier we have the Obama era, where they emphasized climate change policies with a cooperation with the Europeans. And what did they want? They literally want to increase wind energy and solar energy to replace coal and natural gas. So the objective for many years is to replace natural gas and coal. But with this massive increase in energy consumption, that objective cannot be met. We cannot. We need all energy sources. And energy demand is not only increasing because of the increase in income that is leading to comfort and the increase in AI and autonomous vehicles, etc. We have other issues. Urbanization worldwide is increasing substantially. And when we talk about urbanization, we are moving from the periphery basically to the center. We are moving to big cities. Those people who are coming to the cities, even if they don't get a job, they are enjoying the energy consumption of the city. And you look at illegal immigration, for example, or immigrants from Central America to the United States, or from India to Canada, or from Africa to Europe. The the moment they land in those countries, their energy consumption go through the roof. And we are talking about tens of millions of people every year. We are not talking about just 200,000 people. So energy consumption is going through the roof, and we need all energy sources. At the same time, we have people on the left who are fighting this idea because they want only solar and wind, which is an intermittent energy. So you can see where the crisis is going to happen. As a result, you are going to see empty data centers because we don't have steady energy for them 24/7 to operate. And this is going to be the problem in China, it's going to be in India, it's going to be all over the place. And then we have other problems with this related to politics and the trade war and the tariffs and everything else. I know you are going to delve into this later on, but I just want to mention the idea here that those trade wars basically are going to cause interruptions in those systems, and it's going to cause problems. And then we have the regulations. We do need nuclear energy. We do need to build reactors as soon as possible, not only in the United States, in various countries around the world. And because of the regulations and because of the bureaucrats, this being slowed down, and I will go back here to the conflict between the people and the companies and the big AI companies. And the reason why, because what we've seen in last month or so, that companies wanted to build nuclear reactors for their own business, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. But they found out that the regulations are so bad that they cannot get them running probably in 20 years, but they need this energy now. So what they are doing, they are literally signing contracts, binding contracts with.
Freeze up for a second, doctor. Froze up for 1 second.
The power generation.
Oh, I'm going to interrupt you. You froze up for a second. So, okay. So you just go back a few seconds of what you were saying. Microsoft. So they sign contracts.
Microsoft basically and others are signing contracts with utilities to supply them with power. But those utilities are supplying us, people, with power too. And those Microsoft and others, instead of building their own plants, they are taking our own supplies of electricity. So we are going to end up with a clash, and people are going to call their representatives and tell them about it, and representatives wanted to be re-elected again. So they will force those companies literally to cut their supplies, cut off the supplies to the data centers, etc., because people need that. So we do need the additional supplies of electricity. We need to kind of streamline the regulations where those companies can build those nuclear reactors quickly and supply them with energy, because the demand for energy is increasing at a pace that we cannot keep up with it unless we build nuclear.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time, extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I mean, look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time. Is that the arms race right now? I had Porter Stansberry on here a little while ago, and he was saying how energy is the spice in relation to the Dune movies. That is what that is the coveted, that is the gold, is all centered around energy between United States, China, etc. So, go ahead.
The issue here is we have several issues, and if I want to mix here the business of energy with politics. We all heard about the interruptions in the Red Sea, and the story that is common among people and in the media that we have a war in Gaza between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and the Houthis, who support the Gazans, basically, they started threatening shipping in the Red Sea, and therefore ships being diverted that include tankers, oil tankers, and LNG carriers. So that's the general story. But that's the narrative. That's the narrative. I'm going to ask a question right now, and then I will keep talking about the issues. Russia now sends its oil through the Red Sea. All the oil going, all the Urals crude that goes to Asia goes through the Red Sea, which means that they have an agreement with the Houthis that the Houthis will not attack them. And they have no problems. And a number of ships pass every day in front of the Houthis, and there is no problem at all. And China and India are happy receiving those shipments. The problem is, when Russia wants to send LNG to China, those LNG carriers used to go through the Red Sea. They are not going through the Red Sea. They are going around Africa, 6,000 miles extra to reach China. So why oil can go through the Red Sea, but LNG cannot? All the excuses for it do not make any sense, because the Russians have no problem with the Houthis. The Qataris who send LNG to Europe have no problem with the Houthis. Basically, they've been accused of supporting the Houthis. So why LNG carriers are not going through the Red Sea? For those interested, you can look at my timeline on Twitter. I put all the maps. You can see all the LNG tankers around the world, and you can see that the Red Sea is empty. There is nothing there. But all those tankers going around Africa used to go through the Red Sea. So why oil can go, but LNG cannot go? The issue here is this, that the Red Sea has become the hottest area, the most important area, the most significant area in the world, even before Gaza, even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I have a theory. It's not necessarily that you agree with me or others agree with me, but I'm going to present that theory. Before we had the war on terrorism, and certain groups, certain companies, certain businesses, certain politicians jumped on the wagon and expanded the concept of that terrorism. And they instituted laws and other regulations, and they expanded the politics of it in a way where they can control trade, they can control flow of capital, investment, and financing. So someone was trying to ride the wave to benefit from the war against terrorism. But when you have a war against terrorism, that is directed only to the countries accused of terrorism. You can control their trade, you can control their finances, you can control the capital flow, etc. So you cannot control the world. And there are many countries you don't have any control over. Then we have the wave of climate change. And all of a sudden, we have businesses, politicians, government jumping on climate change. Now with the climate change, basically, you can literally control the world trade, you can control financing, you can control capital flows. And if you look at the regulations, you look at the contracts, every single contract being signed in the last 10 years or so by the United States or Europe has clauses on climate change. And literally, you can cancel contracts legally because of climate change. You can, if you have a contract to build a factory in Mexico and you don't want to complete it, you can accuse Mexico of some environmental things and you can get out of it. And literally, using climate change, the superpowers basically started controlling world trade and everything related to it, and financing, of course. You cannot get financing unless you comply with the European code regarding energy transition. What they did not know and what they did not notice is that China knew the game early. She says, okay, if the whole world is going to go, if the whole Western world is going to go for climate change, Europe and the United States, and they are going to choke me with it because the idea is control. Here is what I'm going to play the game. I'm going to look for all the sources that are needed for that climate change policies or the implementation of climate change policies. I'm going to look for all the sources that are needed for the energy transition, and I'm going to control them. So they control the minerals, they control the processing, and they control the industries, which include the electric vehicles and the batteries. And years later, like 10, 15 years later, the Western world woke up to the fact that they have all the regulations for the climate change to apply it, but they don't have the resources because China controls that. And what was the reaction? Trade wars and tariff. So at the end, you can see it is about, the whole thing is about control. Now let's go back to the Red Sea and why the US Navy is in the Red Sea right now. Of course, the Houthis were the useful idiot in this case. So what happened is the Red Sea became the most significant area in the world because China, when the Western world woke up to the fact that now China controls all the minerals and the processing and everything related to the energy transition, what happened is China was importing most of those materials from Africa and Latin America through the Red Sea and exporting solar panels to the United States and Europe through the Red Sea, exporting the wind turbines and the blades and everything else through the Red Sea, exporting those electric vehicles and the batteries through the Red Sea. So the Red Sea became the most significant area for world trade. And the United States, when the United States and the UK woke up late, they said, okay, now I'm going to go for trade wars. And part of that trade wars, I have to control the Red Sea. But I need a reason. I need a direct reason because I have Saudi Arabia on one side and Egypt on the other. How am I going to find an excuse to bring my navy to control the Red Sea? Well, the Houthis were the useful idiot. I'm not talking about coordination. Sometimes just useful idiots serve you without coordination. So the US right now and the UK control the Red Sea. Literally, they control the Red Sea. And what is in the United States? The United States is the largest exporter of LNG in the world. And the US LNG has become part of US foreign policy long time ago. In fact, if you go back to 2014, who was the president at that time? Obama. But strangely enough, it was the Republicans and the Democrats who agreed in 2014 that they need to support the US LNG industry. Remember, we had no exports in 2014 except what we had in Alaska for 40 years. But out of the lower 48, we did not have any exports. We used to be importers. But the Republicans and the Democrats, in fact, it was led by Condoleezza Rice during the Obama administration, that we need to push for US LNG to replace Russian gas in Europe. This is not because of Ukraine. Ukraine was in 2022. This was in 2014. So the plan was already put there. We need to replace Russian gas in Europe, and we are going to do it through LNG. And that's why you see Trump during his first term was promoting LNG. Then Biden, who is on the other side, came in and promoted LNG. And then Trump came back and still promoting LNG. So everyone is promoting LNG and looking at LNG as part of US foreign policy to replace Russian gas in Europe. Not only that, with the trade war in China, what Trump was planning? Trump was saying, look, we export oil to China, we export LNG to China. I'm going to use those two cards to pressure China on trade. And we woke up one morning at the end of February, and we found out that China stopped importing LNG and oil from the United States. And Trump lost both cards. And we go back to the origin of the fight over climate change. China knew in advance, and they are fighting it back. And now when the United States tried to use energy as a weapon, China was fighting it back. Of course, what enabled China to do that is low economic growth in China. If China was growing at 7 and 8%, they couldn't do that. But they were able to do it simply because of low of low economic growth. So when we talk about trade wars, then you look at the sanctions on Russia, you look at the sanctions on Venezuela, you look at the sanctions on Iran, for example, it's all over energy. And what China is doing, again, China is replying to all of that by creating this gray or dark fleet. They ghost ships, whatever. There are many names for that. We are talking about probably 700 ghost tankers in the ocean every day, transporting oil to China and other places with the help of China. China is using AI, they are using satellites, they are using ship-to-ship transfer, they are using all kinds of things to break those sanctions, and they've been successful with it, with the cooperation with Russia and Iran. So the whole story, what I'm trying to convey here is we have the West and we have China on the other side, and both of them are powerful, both of them are playing their tricks, and this been going on for a long time, and energy is at the center of that. We released our daily energy report this morning, and one of the stories that we covered basically is related to China. China right now, and this is probably the bombshell of your show today, China today has the largest oil inventory in its history. Chinese oil inventories at record high today. The highest. This is important because the highest was during the COVID because demand was down and oil was cheap. So why they are doing this? And then you look at China and you say their coal use and coal production is going up. Their own oil production is going up. Their own natural gas production is going up. They are getting the gas via pipelines from Russia, and their renewable energy use, wind and solar, is at record high. So what they are doing? Well, 3 years ago, it seems that the government of China instructed their own companies to focus on domestic resources. Although their domestic source, especially shale, is more expensive than importing gas. Why? Because they came to the conclusion that one day there will be a war or sanctions. There will be a major conflict. And since most of their energy sources used to come through the Malacca Strait, the United States can take over the Malacca Strait and literally choke China. So what was the Chinese response? Chinese response, I'm going to build the highest inventory of gas, I'm going to build the highest inventory of everything. And I'm going to build my domestic sources so I can survive at least for a year. So again, we go back to the same idea, the conflict between China and the West. And now we go back to the Red Sea again. Because if you look at military reports by US generals and others, you will see that if there is a fight over Taiwan, or there is a fight in Malacca Strait, the level of the US would win, but the number of casualties would be extremely high. And some genius came up with the idea, said, I can achieve the same goal by controlling the Red Sea without losing a single person, because they literally can choke China from the Red Sea. So to go back to you, I'm sorry I took a long time to explain all of this, but the idea here is you ask about wars and energy. Energy is at the center of all of these things.
So in your estimation then, based on what you just said, how far behind is China than the United States in this arms race?
The United States right now is playing catch up. Because China was way ahead. Right now, we do have a conflict, a big issue, which is China decided to halt the exports of rare earth minerals to everyone. Of course, they say to everyone, but they meant literally Europe and the United States. And this is a big issue. And the reason why, because many industries in the United States and Europe, if they don't get them, literally some factories and some production lines will stop. And the factories of electric vehicles will literally stop. Just they have probably 60 days of storage of these materials and that's it. But that's why the Trump administration basically was looking for something to choke China on and pressure China. And they found out that China uses ethane, which is ethane basically is a gas that is needed for the petrochemical industry, that is needed for almost everything else, including the electric vehicle industry and everything else. And China, most of the ethane they import is from the United States. And the United States literally blocked that as a reaction to the rare earth ban. And Chinese industries cannot, there is no replacement for it, by the way. So the Chinese industries basically cannot last for long without shutting down. So right now we have this kind of fight where the two guys are fighting and both of them are killing each other. And both of them are going to bleed to death unless they reach a resolution. That's why some people are expecting a trade deal very soon, because both of them are killing each other and both of them are bleeding. So no ethane in China, some factories will close down. No rare earth metals in Europe and the United States, some factories will shut down. That means economic growth is going to slow down, or probably we might end up with a recession just because of this fight.
Trade talks are going on right now, I believe, with China, with the United States and China.
Sorry?
I said trade talks are going on right now between the United States and China.
Yes, and that's why some people think, because of the kind of the rare earth from one side and the ethane and one on the other, kind of making those talks more urgent than ever, and they need to reach a resolution before those factories close.
Now, so if they are able to come to a resolution, prices are still going to be a lot higher, right, for all the goods that are imported from China into the United States?
The problem we are going to have is, once we reach a resolution, of course, the stock market is going to go up, and oil prices are going to go up, and gold will go down, simply on the sentiment alone. We are going to see those changes. But the disruption to the supply chain has already happened. And it takes months to recover that. So the damage from tariffs and the trade war has already happened. If we reach a deal with China tomorrow, it will take several months until we repair all the damage that took place. So we might end up with another quarter of negative growth or slow growth naturally, even if we reach a deal tomorrow.
How did the United States let this happen to let China get so far ahead?
This is kind of a long process. I mean, we are talking about something being going on for 30 years or more. So this did not happen overnight. And we got to remember one thing, that something that US politicians basically always forget, which is extremely important. When we talk about, for example, let's talk about the energy industry. You talk about companies developing an oil field in the Gulf of Mexico. They are talking about 8 to 10 years of work, and then 30 years after that of production. So we're talking about 30, 40 years for a project. So the company and the CEO and everyone around him basically are thinking about the next 30, 40 years. But the politicians are thinking in terms of 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, and 8 years. So we have a clash between that business cycle and the political cycle. So if someone comes in the middle, like what we've seen recently, if the Trump administration came in and relaxed some environmental regulations that been there since the Biden and Obama, oil companies are not going to like it. Now, a politician will think, why? I'm helping them. Yes, you are helping me, but what will happen when you leave? I already spent $15 billion to meet those environmental regulations, and now you are relaxing them. No, I'm not going to change. And therefore, you are not going to see the additional increase that you are talking about. So some of those projects basically that last for multiple decades, do not fit the political cycles, and therefore we have that conflict and the lack of reaction from the industry to politicians. Simply, politicians do not understand this. A presidential order will not solve those problems because the next president is going to change it again. The other issue that politicians ignore, that China, when they are working, basically, they are not looking at political cycles. They don't have political cycles like the West. And I always wondered why they don't think about it this way. If the president orders something in China, or any committee orders something, it will happen. While bureaucracy and lawsuits and the court system in the United States will delay it forever. So we are working on two different speeds in this case. I mean, you already have seen what happened with the tariffs when a judge basically stops it and then the other one allow it, etc. Et That's not the case with China. China is one man statement and it's over. So we have two different speeds too. So aside from the fact that China started early, the two-speed system basically is being reflected negatively on the United States.
Do you see then the United States moving to a model more like China in terms of, excuse me, reindustrialization of America, fight for energy?
Of course, Trump would like to be that, to do that. We already know he had this tendency basically to be kind of more dictating than what we know historically in the United States. But industrialization or reindustrialization in the United States is very difficult for many reasons. And one of the reasons basically is our education system. I'll give you some examples. Look at the oil industry. What the oil industry missed over the years is that the climate change profit. So the prophets of climate change, the pundits of climate change, they literally started with kids, teaching them about climate change. By the time those kids basically reach high school and they want to go to university, no one wants to be a geologist, no one wants to be a petroleum engineer, no one wants to be in the mining business. And what is our fight with China right now? It's over the minerals. China has full universities. They have a university called University of Petroleum. I mean, the whole university is about petroleum. Okay? While you look at the United States in the last 10 years, many universities that has petroleum engineering department closed down. They closed down the departments or they merged them with others. We have only very few universities in the United States that have graduate programs in petroleum engineering and geology right now, while they have full universities in China on this. And our fight with them, again, is about the mining and the resources. But we don't have the engineers. We don't have the number of people to work with this. In fact, this is one of the things we always highlight in our publications, that the oil industry being at the forefront of mechanization, robotics, and AI, not by choice. Simply because the industry first is cyclical, so people give up when they get laid off and they go to another industry. And then those who are graduating from high school, going to university, they see the cyclical nature of it. They don't want to go into it. And then you add the climate change education to it. People do not want to go to it regardless of the money made. So the industry realized that long time ago. So how we are going to solve this problem? The only way to solve it basically is good to go for robotics and to go for AI. In fact, just recently, the son of one of my friends sent a picture of a rig to his dad, and he said, "This is a completely mechanized robotic rig. There is not a single person on it." And he wrote half of the codes on it, which means that this is a rig drilling for oil with no people. But the industry did this not because they like AI. They have no choice. So one of the problems we have is the education system in the United States is not going to produce those people that we need, while China does. The other issue that we have all those environmental regulations from the 70s which make everything difficult to do. So you want to go for a mine, the regulations basically are enough to close it before it even opens. So between environmental regulations and lack of human resources, we cannot even do that. The other issue that is related to moving the industries back to the United States, that the cost of labor, as you know, is very high in the United States relative to other countries. And there is always this fight over minimum wage between Democrats and Republicans, and fight over all other things, benefits, etc. One of the problems we have in the West that we don't have in China or other places, that labor is free to go on strike when they have legitimate reasons. Well, guess what? In many countries around the world, they cannot even mention the word strike. If someone talked to another person about going on strike, basically will be arrested on the spot. So labor strikes basically become a big problem. People talk always about interruptions because of political reasons in various countries. Well, most of the interruptions in Europe and the United States are related to labor strikes. You cannot go on labor strike in China. So beside the speed, beside the education system, beside all of that stuff, okay, the system where you have a dictator basically help them against our democracy in the United States.
Which I don't think people are really grasping how far behind we've fallen on this in terms of education, in terms of manpower. And you know, this isn't going to this. You can't flick a light switch and reverse the damage that's been caused, right, by our lack of taking these things seriously and all the regulation that we have.
I'm going to tell you a story that happened with me personally. Years ago, I went to China. I got received by the driver who is driving a brand new BMW. The BMW has Wi-Fi that's special to that BMW. When I arrived to the hotel, he phoned them and told them that we are arriving in 2 minutes. A young lady was waiting for me at the door. She took me immediately to my room. She opened the door, walked me to the room, and she asked me for my passport. I give her my passport, and she got a little machine, like a roller, from her pocket. She slid just kind of like the passport. She handed it to me, and she left. That was the receptionist. That was the whole process to get into the hotel. Just a couple of months later, I came into Canada, Toronto, Canada, and there was a problem at the airport. Anyway, came into the hotel. I had to wait in line for 1 hour and a half. 1 hour and a half. So you can see the difference in the use of technology, in the mentality between a Western country and China. Right now, even if you look, in fact, when we talk about way behind, right now, in some U.S. airports, you don't have to show your passport, you don't have to show your ticket. Okay? You just look at the machine, they will read your eye, and it's over. Well, I went through this more than 12 years ago in some countries. So yes, we are behind. And we are behind on several fronts. For example, right now, when you look at the way, if you look at Saudi Arabia, there is Hajj, which the pilgrimage for Muslims, just ended in Saudi Arabia. They approximately, there were about 3 million people in the same place, and they have to move from one place to another at the same time. And that's, of course, a nightmare for anyone. And the way they've done it without any problems, without a chaos, was unbelievable, because they use mathematical models and AI in a way where they can literally move all those buses, all those cars, all those people, everything without any problems. And when that religious leader basically gave the sermon on the biggest day of the year, it was translated into 35 languages simultaneously with voice. So he gave the speech using AI in 36 languages at once. So the use of AI basically, and most of that AI is coming from, by the way, coming from China. So the US is behind on many things when it comes to AI and the use of these things. I'm going to give you another example. Until now, I'm close here to DFW Airport and others. If you go through the airport, basically we go through TSA and security. You wonder what is the advantage of technology if they are going to treat you the same way they are treating you at the airport. And when they go through your bags and they through your jackets and through your pants and they pat on you and all that stuff. What's the role of technology? Because in technology, we can see even from on the other side of the world, we can zoom in on tankers and ships, and we can see where people are sitting and eating, and we cannot even figure a bag or a person walking through security in the airport. So what happened is I had those little scissors, the folded scissors you can fold and they look like a circle. And you know, we had a period in airports where the scissors were not allowed. So I resorted to carrying it because I travel a lot and I need them. And I went through several airports around the world in Europe and the United States, and no one even paid attention. It looks like a circle. Arrived in China, and the lady said, she gave me the bag and she said, get the scissors out. I said, excuse me? And she said, get the scissors out. And she showed me the screen. And the screen showed the layers of the scissors. Not only the scissors, showed the layers of it because it's folded. So the technology is there. Why it's not being used?
Is that to keep people employed? Is that why they're not utilizing it at this point?
I have no idea whether it's people employed or because I have some friends who think that the security mentality that coming from certain countries, not from the United States, that they want to show you that they are always there, and therefore you have to feel that fear all the time. So that could be one of the explanations.
My first reaction to that, being that I flew last week, is, you know, they have a lot of people employed by TSA. So if they implement these types of measures, you're going to have a lot of people out of work.
That's absolutely correct, but still that's manageable relative to I think I lean toward the idea of it's a security mentality rather than the employment.
Do you, to make a couple different thoughts running through my head here. Are you surprised how fast, if you believe, how fast AI is moving right now?
I am. In fact, there are many things going on, but I'll tell you a joke. I think it happened in every household. My two boys were fighting, and they were screaming at each other, and they were almost kind of getting into a big fight. And Alexa basically responded because one of them was saying something, and Alexa thought he was talking to her, and she spoke, and all of a sudden everyone was laughing and ended the fight. So that tells you basically they are responding and they are listening and they are spying, and you cannot trust anything anymore.
Where do you see this 5-10 years from now?
My argument basically, just like anyone else, people are scared and they want regulations basically to regulate this before it gets out of hand. It's just too scary right now to imagine what could happen with this technology.
Do you think it's beyond that point though of regulation, that it's already spiraled out of control?
I think the fear is there. Again, if you read the articles and read what the specialists are talking about, I think we should be fearful of it. It's already causing chaos. We've already seen some problems with people showing up on YouTube videos that we learned later that those videos are AI and they are not people talking. So you can imagine the chaos that can cause.
Yeah, I think about how many jobs will be eliminated in the next 5 to 10 years, and both at the top, on the top and the bottom. What will the future of accounting look like? Software engineering.
Well, absolutely, and I mean, think about it. I think the most of the accounting jobs will be eliminated.
So you feel that way too, then, on the accounting
Oh,
front?
absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What about in the world of law? Attorneys. Will you need all these attorneys?
You are absolutely correct, and I'll tell you something from the oil industry, for example. From the oil industry, when they used to go and inspect platforms, or in fact inspect the big tankers, oil tankers. They need multiple people basically going around for a day, two, sometimes a week to inspect everything. Right now, they don't need to do any of that at all. Some of them basically do the inspection via drones from their offices in Houston or somewhere else. They are even far away from it. And some people basically just put sensors and cameras on the platforms and the ships, and they are monitored constantly. So you don't need those people anymore. So we are moving in a way where there will be a major job elimination, and people basically there will be job creation in other areas. And I think, as a former academic, I think universities have to change all their curriculum because it is very clear that the future with AI is going to be double majors. You cannot have one major. You
And
need double majors.
speaking on academia here for a second, how would you suggest for people that are going into the system, into the college system, some type of nuclear? Because there's going to be a lot of opportunity in nuclear energy.
Well, not basically. I mean, I'll give you a true example. Here in Texas, historically, if you look at the number of jobs available when the oil industry was booming, about 13% of the jobs available were in the oil sector. Again, this is during the oil boom in the state of Texas. Right now, the number of job openings in data analysis in Texas is over 50%, 50. And the reason why, because data analysis, of course, that's part of it is AI and all that stuff. Data analysis basically goes to every sector. So you can have it in health, you can have it in finance, you can have it in oil, you can have it in mining, you can have it in the communication sector or everywhere else. So you need that data analysis. The reason why we talked earlier about the consumption of data and how we are consuming more data than ever and we will produce more data than ever, that need analysis. So data analysis basically is going to be the big thing in the future. But you cannot have it without knowing something else. So you can study data analysis, but if you don't know petroleum engineering or you don't know how the oil industry works, you cannot function in the oil industry. If you don't know how doctors and pharmacists work, you cannot work in the health sector. So that's why the universities have to reorient themselves basically for double majors, where AI and other issues basically will be kind of integrated into the new education system.
So you'll need the data and you need the data analysis portion, and then whatever field you decide you want to go into, whether it be
Correct.
nuclear
Or even medicine.
Yeah, that's another interesting point from a healthcare standpoint in regards to AI, because coders, billers, will you need as many nurse practitioners?
Absolutely. There are many. I mean, AI can do kind of the primitive stuff because people need to believe it, to believe that, and they believe the primitive stuff. But above that, probably they still need the doctors and the nurses, etc. But the whole idea here is that you cannot be in the future. Basically, you need to have double major to guarantee a job and be employed. Otherwise, if you are just, let's say, a civil engineer without data analysis, without AI knowledge, you're not going to find a job.
Game set match. You're done. So with
So that's
that,
why universities need to integrate that.
so the people not listening to this are not looking far ahead because everybody thinks you're not everybody. People think this is all going to be fine and everything's going to correct itself and we're going to go back to the way life was. It'll go back to the normal they knew before. What will the government do with all these people that are going to be out of work? I mean, do you see some type of UBI being rolled out?
This is a big problem. We need to wait and see really what happens. It's very hard, even for the experts, basically, to predict what's going on. And the reason why, because while we are talking about all those layoffs and the jobs that will be lost, we've seen this throughout history for the last, since the Industrial Revolution in Europe. We've seen this so many times, and yet we kept creating jobs. So we will see this happening. The issue that will the education system keep up to prevent those people from being useless? And that's really where the problem is, that we need to educate those people. To give you an example here, that it's very hard for me right now to find companies or workers basically to trim the trees in my yard. I still need manual labor who are experts in cutting trees to come in. It's very difficult to see AI basically taking over some of those primitive jobs. So we still need them. And for an AI who is AI expert who is making, let's say, 250,000 a year, he's not going to spend his time mowing his yard and cutting the limbs on the trees. He wants to hire someone because his time value is way, way higher than the others. So there will still be that certain jobs that cannot be replaced by AI, but the education system has to change to be able to guarantee jobs for those people. So yes, AI is going to destroy jobs, but it's going to create new ones that require certain type of education.
Incredible time we're living in right now, isn't it, Doctor?
Sorry?
I said it's an incredible time that we're living in right now.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the issues, of course, we are suffering from right now, as parents and as educators, that the young generation right now, is the most privileged generation ever existed on earth. And because they are so privileged and so free in a sense, they think that life is easy and they can do things on their own and what they want, etc. And that's of course not the case. So when they grow up, it's going to be a serious problem. So being privileged, just to give you an idea, long time ago when I was a student, a girl will walk into a classroom, probably whatever she is wearing worth probably $30, $40, including the purse that she's carrying. I can tell you, when I was teaching at the university, a girl will walk into my class, and what she is wearing, what she has on, worth more than $3,000. So the whole generation, basically, we have this shift. And when you have a privileged generation, how you are going to convince them to do the hard job? How you are going to convince them to go to fields where have double majors, where they have to compete with the Chinese and the Indians and everyone else around the world? So again, back to the education system.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to get away with sociology, philosophy, general studies type degrees in order to provide you opportunity when you get out into the workforce.
Absolutely. And we still need these, not necessarily to be majors as much as education, because we need well-rounded people anyway. We don't want, and this is an advice if there are young people, probably parents who will benefit from this advice who are listening to the show. There is something called the rat poison syndrome. And that's why people need to avoid this rat poison syndrome. The story goes like this. There is this socialite who is kind of like California flowery woman who is gorgeous, and she is very good at communication, etc. And she is a real estate agent. She is well connected with politicians, business leaders, etc. And she is married to a very famous scientist who is awfully rich. And this scientist is specialist in rat poisoning. and he had many patents, and he makes a lot of money out of those patents. And famous, and we had all those papers, all those books, all these things, etc. She holds those parties every week, and she invites all those politicians and the top of the society and the rich people, etc. And she noticed that all the time she is talking to various groups in the party, and he is always alone, carrying his drink and standing alone. She goes to him and says, "Why you don't mingle with people?" Then she goes home, they get into a fight, why he is always alone and not mingling with people. Finally, she had it. So they have this big fight because they have this big event coming up, and there are very important people that he needs to socialize with them. And he promised her that he will. And they went to that event, and she saw her husband in a big group talking, and she was very happy to see him that. 5 minutes later, she looked back, and he's standing alone with his drink. So she went back to him, and she said, "We agreed that you are going to be with the group and socialize." And he said, "Look, I tried, but every time I talk about rat poisoning, people leave me." Because that's all he knows. Yes, he is famous, he is rich, he is married to a trophy wife, etc. But all he knows is to talk about rat poisoning, and people are not interested in that. So my advice to your kids, for those who are listening, is that make sure your kids won't be that way. Make sure that he is well, or she is well-rounded, where they get rid of that syndrome and they know many things. So yes, AI is the future, and you want your kid to be in that, or you want to be a doctor, to be a physician, etc. But make sure they know history, and they know geography, and they know sociology, and they know all the other things that they need to know.
I want to shift here over to BRICS, because I heard you and Marty talking about that, and I find your perspective something that I don't hear. So if you don't mind sharing, your thoughts on BRICS and where you think it's going.
Sure. BRICS is a paper tiger. The media is trying to make it look big, very influential, and some analysts will come in and some professor will come in and show you the numbers and look at the size and look at this and look at their investment and look at this. And I was trained on economic integration under one of the top leaders in the world on this. His name is Alexander Condenasis. And I learned from Alexander Condenasis at the University of Oklahoma several things. And he worked on the EU and etc. And he always emphasized the idea that the success of a group together needs some sort of harmony in between them, where the similarities are too many and they outweigh the differences, in addition to other conditions. And at that time when I was a student, basically the EU being built up before it becomes an EU. So we went through this on kind of like weekly basis with every meeting. And you can see what he's talking about, that, for example, he thinks Greece should not be part of the EU because it does not belong. It just does not fit there. But it is there just because of the geography. And that's why you don't hear much about Greece within the EU, simply because they are ineffective. So when it comes to BRICS, the issue was that they are going to have their own currency. Well, it took Europe 300 years until they got to the euro. People say, well, it took them 40 years. No, it did not take them 40 years. It took them 300 years to get to the euro. And you think BRICS will do it in 15 or 20 years? And you look at Europe, it's one continent and countries next to each other. What's going to bring China to Brazil or Brazil to India? The other issue is, why did the UK leave the EU? Because of nationalism. And nationalism in those countries is so high. I mean, look at India in particular. There is no way the current regime in India basically is going to accept anything from anyone else, especially China, where they have war with. So the basics of economic integration do not exist. You can meet, you can talk to the media, you can say all of these things, but the basics do not exist. When you talk about the level of income or the level of development, for example, and you want to compare, for example, Saudi Arabia, of course, was offered to join BRICS and they refused. But you look at BRICS and you look at the level of development, you can see the major differences between them, and that does not fit either. So BRICS basically is just kind of a trial to do something, and that's it. The dollar is going to remain dominant, and the fear from BRICS, basically the whole BRICS issue is really about China, and that's it. And we already spent a great deal about China today, talking about the conflict between China and the West, and that's it. It's about China, it's not about BRICS. And then you look at India, for example, and India will not deviate from the US line. Don't expect India to go against the United States. Don't expect India to align with China against the United States. And for Russia in particular, Russia is something on its own. And they've been on their own forever. So to integrate them with others and have like the head of the central bank from Brazil and the head of something else from India and distant Russians are not going to accept it. So that's kind of the conclusion of BRICS.
So what was the idea behind it then? Because if it's a paper tiger, is it a psyop almost? Was it some type of play?
There are two theories here. There are two theories. First of all, some people thought it will work because they can align against the West. And it should work because there is cooperation and mutual interest in between them. Others, basically, including me, I look at it differently. I look at it because we've seen this in other organizations. China wants to act, China wants to behave, but they want an umbrella to operate under that does not look like China. Or Russia wants an umbrella to operate under, but it does not look like Russia. So they needed an umbrella to act, and BRICS provided that. So it's not China who is talking, it's BRICS. It's not Russia who is talking, it's BRICS.
How much longer do you think we'll be hearing about this then for the whole idea of BRICS?
Oh, I mean, it's going to be there for a long time. Our problem, and we've seen this with the dollar issue, with the demise of the dollar idea, that we have gold traders, certain type of gold traders, some of them are Bitcoin, basically, who are bringing this up over and over and over. So even if those guys give up the idea, those gold traders in the United States and Europe are not going to give it up. Because we've seen those guys basically going crazy on YouTube and others basically talking about the petrodollar and the end of the dollar and all that stuff because it serves their pockets. But so even if China and India and others give up the idea, those guys are not going to give it up because they will create a shadow BRICS to keep operating and promote their ideas.
You gotta keep selling your stuff, right, Doctor?
Absolutely.
Now, you've also talked about what you think the future, where the future of oil and the price of oil is going. And it's up, 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 up.
Sure. So here is the thing, and we are talking about long term here. The story goes like this. The story is that we are going to go for climate change policies, and those climate change policies are going to increase the use of solar and wind, and therefore the demand for oil, gas, and coal is going to decline substantially. We already established at the beginning of the show that the demand for gas and coal is going to increase, or it's not going to decline because of the massive demand for energy. But when it comes to oil, here's the funny part, that renewable energy and oil are not substitutes. People miss this point. The level of substitution between renewable energy and oil is extremely limited. And the reason why, because solar and wind are used to generate electricity, while oil is rarely used to generate electricity. If you look at the United States, Canada, Europe, India, China, Japan, South Korea. In most of those countries, it's less than 2% of total generation is generated by oil, mostly in some islands or some because of some historical reasons for it. So even if we double, triple our capacity of solar and wind, there is no impact on oil demand. So that's number one, because people think solar and wind is going to take over oil and therefore oil prices are going to decline. That's a fact that there is a very limited substitution. The second one is part of those climate change policies are electric vehicles. And a lot of people, because of fake reports coming out of those who benefits from those reports, because of those fake reports, they are saying that the demand for oil is going to decline substantially. Look at the numbers. The numbers basically are very clear. They keep emphasizing the idea that we need to publish stories about increase in sales of electric vehicles. And in those stories, they focus on the growth as percentage, but they don't show you the numbers. But what matters when you talk about demand for oil is the number of electric vehicles on the road. That's what really matters. If I am going to buy an electric vehicle today to replace my old electric vehicle, my new purchase has no impact on oil demand, period. So they are counting all those electric vehicles being sold since 2016. They are counting all of that against oil demand. I also, despite the fact that I lost over 25 million of them. So if you look at the number of electric vehicles on the road, there are barely 50 million vehicles. More than half are in China. So what is the impact of that on oil demand? The 50 million electric vehicles, if they did not exist, so electric vehicles never existed, so we are still on gasoline and diesel, that would increase oil demand, assuming those are not second cars, by the way. Assuming they are not second cars, that they will replace only about 1.3 million barrels a day, and that's it. 1.3. Oil demand today is 104 million barrels a day. And the replacement of all this hype, despite spending trillions of dollars since 2010 until now, the replacement is only 1.3 million. And this is the direct replacement. When I say direct, I'm talking just about the end of the story. But those electric vehicles use a lot of oil and gas materials to be built. We have to subtract that. Because they are heavy, they consume a lot of tires. It's almost like 1-4, the ratio. And those tires are made from oil and gas. Because they are heavy, the wear and tear on the roads and the asphalt is higher, and asphalt is made from the oil industry, or made by the oil industry. So you start subtracting from 1.3, and you find out that the savings in terms of oil demand are really small, and therefore the exaggeration is all over the place when it comes to this. So in general, when we correct for all of these things in our model, we don't see any peak in oil demand. While we have people who are predicting a peak in 2025, others in mid-30s, we don't see anything. Our model goes to 2050, and we do not see a peak in oil demand for various reasons, of course. And one of the reasons why, because every kid in Africa who is living in a hut right now wants to have the TV, they want to have all the gadgets that our children have, and they want to have the cars, probably the best cars, not only the regular cars that we have. They want the sport cars and everything else, and they want the electricity, they want the lights, they want all of that. So you look around the world, you look at energy demand, you look at AI, you look at migration, you look at urbanization, etc. There is no way when you incorporate all those factors and you correct for all the models that assume that electric vehicles would destroy oil demand, that oil demand is going to peak and therefore is going to continue going up. The other thing, and I will end with this statement regarding this point, that assume that is going to eat up into demand. And assume that instead of 104 million barrels a day today, we are going to have 80 million barrels a day in 2050. So let's go with them. Let's go with what the IEA and others are saying. 80 million barrels a day of demand does not mean low prices. Because once the price declined the first time because of it, we are going to lose supply. So we might end up with lower demand and higher prices anyway. So it does not mean lower prices at all. But here is the problem. Based on our estimate, based on our modeling, if we want to go back to demand of 2019, when the demand is 100 million barrels a day. So now we are at 1.4, we are expecting it to go above 115 later on. But let's say that electric vehicles are effective and they reduce oil demand, so we go back to 100 by 2050. That 100 million barrels a day that we need in 2050 does not exist today. Which means that I need trillions of dollars. Some estimates say 17 to 18 trillion dollars to bring that 100 million by that time, because I have decline rates in the fields. So by that time, that 100 million is not going to exist. So I need to invest. So the whole argument is fake. The whole argument is incorrect, because whatever amount of oil I need by 2050, whether 50 million, 75 million, or 100 or 115, does not exist today. And therefore, I need that investment. And it is in trillions of dollars.
But the resources, if I'm understanding you correctly, the resources are there to generate that volume that is needed by 2050, but the investment is what is required in order to produce it.
Correct. And therefore, based on this view, you can see where the damage from no one wants his children or grandchildren to be hurt by climate change or any weather event. No one. We don't want that. But at the same time, if you think that our grandchildren are going to die from climate change by 2080, but most of them basically are not going to exist because we are going to have a massive energy crisis that a lot of people are going to die by 2040. Just think about it, where the problem is. So even if we take the other view, still they need to support the idea of additional investment in oil and gas just to survive. So the idea here is we are not against climate change. We are not denying climate change, etc. But we need to come to the middle from both sides. So we cannot deny it. And for those who are on the other side, basically going extreme, they need to realize that. Just look at Europe and look what happened in Germany, and look what happened in Europe in general. Every single government, every single company, every single organization retreated from climate change goals. In the US, in Australia, in Japan, in Europe, all of them. Why? Because they committed to carbon neutrality by a certain date without doing the due diligence. Now they are waking up and they are retreating. So now you retreated. Okay, let's negotiate this. Let's talk about it and what we need to do so we can avoid energy crisis that's going to kill a lot of people. Because every year, a lot of people die from heat in Europe. So if you don't have air conditioning in Europe, basically, to help those people, or you don't have enough fuel, basically, to warm up their homes in the winter, they are going to die earlier than what's expected from climate change. So the idea here is, since everyone is retreating from climate goals, okay, let's focus on supplying enough energy to avoid those problems and work through those goals over a longer period when we do the due diligence. And right now, one of the main problems we are having right now is that everyone is playing around the carbon accounting. And that's why carbon accounting is the mother of all enrons. Because, and I'm not going to name names here, but one of the biggest stores, a company that owns one of the biggest chains in the United States, found out that they're being green 30, 40 years ago. And therefore, they don't need to do anything right now. Why? Because when they hired a guy who is a vice president for sustainability or whatever, and he went to the stores to do his due diligence, he found out that all the stores have those skylights. And they calculated that if I don't have skylights, I have lights, and in this state that where I am, 40% come from coal, and then they did the calculation, and then therefore I am already saving this much carbon, and therefore I am already green. I mean, you talk about greenwashing, that's what it is. Or a company going and buying an island with, let's say, 50 million trees and claiming that this is against their carbon footprint. But those trees are 500 years old or probably 1,000 years old. They've been there all along. So you look at the accounting sheets of all those companies and you add what the carbon saved, it's more than what we have carbon on Earth. So how did that happen? Because everyone is playing this. And now we are discovering, for example, that people can Google that, basically like certain forests being claimed by several companies for the same carbon. So again, carbon accounting is the mother of all enrons. And this is a serious problem we have. And if we get rid of those laws, we can sit down basically and reach kind of a more sensible energy/climate change policies where we do the due diligence, and instead of committing to 2050 or 2060, probably we should do it by 100 or 200 years later, because that's the only way it works out without any major damage or crisis.
Last question. In regards to the Middle East, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, what does the short-term future look like with all these geopolitical tensions that seem to be rising?
Well, the issue is there are negotiations between the U.S. and Iran right now. The Trump administration, President Trump himself wants it to reach a deal. I strongly believe, since I've been talking and writing about this issue, researching it for over 25 years, that there will be no agreement. And any agreement that will be reached will be broken immediately after that. We've seen this so many times. And there are Iran or the Iranian regime cannot deliver what Trump/Netanyahu wants, and Trump cannot deliver what the Iranians want. They cannot, and therefore you cannot reach a deal. That's on number one. Number two, you look at the countries surrounding Iran. You look at Kuwait, you look at UAE, you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, and Oman. None of them wants an attack on Iran. And the reason why, although they don't, in a sense, they look at Iran, or Iran look at them as the enemy, and they look at Iran as the enemy, but they don't want an attack on Iran. And the reason is very simple. Say, if the United States or Israel or others come and attack Iran, and you guys leave, I am stuck with them. They are my neighbor forever. And therefore, if they keep attacking me forever, I am the loser, although I am not involved in this war. So they don't want to escalate simply because they know that the United States is going to withdraw, and it happened all over the place, and leave them with Iran. And Iran then will take its time, basically damaging them and causing problems to them. So those countries do not want this. So what the final outcome of this? I think the final outcome of this is that if you look at the history of Iranian negotiations, the Iranians are very good at dragging negotiations forever. We've seen them over 25 years. They drag negotiations. And the objective basically is not to be involved in any war, not to fight, not to react strongly where they get into war in one way or the other, until they get the nuclear bomb. Once they get the nuclear bomb, then everything will be different the second day. So even if they lose Syria, if they lose Lebanon, if they lose Iraq, if they lose Yemen, even if they are attacked, they are not going to be involved in a war, because they know if they get involved, then their nuclear bomb will be delayed for 30, 40, 50 years, and they will be enslaved in a sense in those 30, 40, 50 years. And therefore, if they drag those negotiations until they get the nuclear bomb, then it's a completely different story. Now, does Netanyahu and Trump knows that? They know that. Well, the people will say, why they don't attack them and bomb the hell out of them? Well, what if you go and bomb and find out you do not bomb the facilities that you really want to bomb? What next? And if Iran retaliates, we've already seen what happened in Saudi Arabia in September 2019 when Aramco was attacked. We lost 5.5 million barrels a day when Aramco was attacked. So they can inflict, it's not necessarily that Iran itself will react. It's cronies in the area because they have cronies in Iraq and various areas in Yemen and etc. And all of them are neighbors of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is the largest exporter of oil in the world.
So with that, then how close do you estimate Iran is from the nuclear bomb? And are you surprised that they don't have it yet?
I have no idea. I am not an expert on this, and I don't think anyone knows exactly where they are. We hear all kind of stories on this. I'm studying the behavior, and my conclusions are based on the behavior over 25 years. We don't know exactly where they are and whether they do, etc. This is just not there. And the Trump administration basically is making a big mistake when every time they talk about negotiations, because the Iranian regime turns that to a different media story. Like in their own media, basically they picture it as if the Trump administration is begging them, oh, please come to the negotiation table. Oh, please come. And that's how they picture it to their own people. And the Trump administration basically, for some reason, they fall into this trap every time. That they need to be aware of the fact that they don't want to give enough meat to the Iranian media, basically, to flip the story.
So you estimate that this will just continue of a slow walk. Iran will continue to slow walk this, potentially avoiding any type of conflict.
Yes, in fact, 20 years ago, I wrote, probably 17 years ago, I wrote an article that's been translated into 10 languages. People can search it on the web. I think the title of it is the Iranian nuclear program, the never-ending crisis. That was 17 years ago, and been vindicated and proven right so far, that this is a never-ending crisis. And the reason why I use this term on purpose, because when we do the outlooks every year for the oil and gas market, as you know, Iran is a major oil producer and exporter. So any negotiations or problems or sanctions basically affect the oil market. So we have to make assumptions in our models about the Iranian oil exports. And therefore, we have to study the nuclear issues that affect the oil exports of the country. And therefore, our assumption is always that we will see volatility in the Iranian oil exports as a result of that.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard, I haven't been following this as long as you have, but it's always, Iran is very close to the nuclear bomb. War is always imminent. It's always imminent. It's always going to happen within a couple hours.
There is a point here, in a sense, and this is a serious point that we have to consider. Okay, let's assume that we have a complete change in government in Iran. And it's just like the perfect government that the US and Israel wants. Okay? Guess what? The whole military complex in the United States is going to lose all the money that's been going to that fight. So there are people in the United States and Israel who do not want this to end. They want it to stay like this because that's how they make money. So the same thing for Iran. Iran on the other side, and I have enough evidence basically to support this point, that there are groups and leaders of the Revolutionary Guards who do not want an agreement. Why? Because under the guise of fighting the United States, they control all the trade of Iran. They control all the oil exports. They control all the smuggling. And they make tons of money out of it. If they end up with an agreement and everything is normalized, they lose their power and they lose their money. So on both sides, we have groups that benefit from the existing situation and they don't want it to end.
How about, with Syria, last question, with Syria and the recent changing of that regime, how realistic is for some type of pipeline to come through
Are you talking about oil or gas? Or both?
Gas.
Gas, okay. In 2008, of course, there are all kind of theories and all kind of conspiracy theories on this. In 2008, there was a proposal that being given to Bashar al-Assad, who was the president of Syria at that time, about a pipeline that go through Syria, gas pipeline. And that's
From
it.
Qatar, not to interrupt you, from Qatar.
Well, I will explain it in a minute. I kept this without names for a reason. It was the Qataris who made the proposal. Okay. Then, when the revolution in Syria basically is 50 years old, but it became on a large scale in 2011. When the revolution started, a French professor at one of the universities, who completely unknown, gave a presentation, and it has a slide. And the slide basically has two lines of pipelines one going from Iran, one going from Qatar, going through Syria. And his theory was, this is a fight between Qatar and Iran on the Syrian ground over pipelines. It was nothing. Someone got hold of that presentation, and they covered it in a TV news hour in Syria. The regime liked it, and they use it as propaganda that there is no issues related to freedom or human rights abuses in Syria. It is really the imperial powers basically fighting over our resources and our land. And then Russia and China took it and expanded the idea to tell their own people, there is nothing about freedom. This is the CIA playing those people. Those people are stupid and they don't understand, and they're being played and they're being paid. The fact is, the proposal that's been introduced to Bashar al-Assad in 2008 is a pipeline coming out of Iran, not out of Qatar. But Qatar will finance the pipeline. So there is only one pipeline. There are no two. So that's the first fact. It's a one pipeline. The gas is Iranian gas, and the pipeline is financed by Qatar. And it goes to Syria, to central Syria, and connected to something called the Arab Gas Pipeline. The Arab Gas Pipeline goes from Egypt to Jordan, Syria, all the way to Turkey, and the idea it will go all the way to Europe. So why did Bashar al-Assad reject that? Because Putin told him that. Notice that Putin started building the Nord Stream 2. After that, because they wanted to block any gas coming from they want to control the gas market in Europe. So they don't want any competition. So if there is a conspiracy theory, it is Bashar al-Assad Putin conspiracy theory. It's not the opposite. So that's number one. Number two, people, after the liberation of Damascus, people brought up this idea again, and they said, now Qatar is heavily involved in this revolution because they want their pipeline. The story goes like this. There is no proposal. There is nothing at all. The Turkish energy minister was talking to the media, and a journalist asked him about the pipeline. And the Turkish minister says, well, if the circumstances allow it, we will discuss it. And then the whole social media went crazy after that. There is no proposal. And to end this story, finally, to end the story completely and shut it down, there is no gas in Qatar or Iran to put in this pipeline. And the reason why, because Qatar, after that, with cooperation with Iran, decided to convert that to LNG. So all the expansion we see in the area is LNG. It's already committed, billions of dollars been invested. So that gas right now is going to LNG projects. There is no gas. And if there is no gas, there is no pipeline. End of story.
All this based upon a question by a journalist that was taken and just spun into a whirlwind and get us to where we're at now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The power of social media, right, Doctor?
Absolutely. I mean, we have, when it comes to social media, I'll give you some examples. I know we are running out of time here, but to give you some examples, when we have those stories about the UAE withdrawing from OPEC Plus and prices went down by 5%, by $5, that was completely fake story, published by the Wall Street Journal. We fired up in the 5 o'clock in the morning, basically, we fired up an email to our clients telling them, this is fake news, ignore it. By 10 o'clock, we start getting the thank you messages because people made a lot of money out of that because prices bounced back when they discovered that it was fake news. But if you look at social media, it continued for 2 days. So although the story ended and being proven and being traded and everything else, people still basically forwarding the story on social media and going crazy, and people commenting on it, although it ended.
You know, it's yeah. I've said this. You know, if you look back at 2008 when you had the financial meltdown, social media wasn't as strong or powerful as it is today. And how much worse potentially could it have been because you could put something out there about, say, ABC Bank, and people would panic to go on the retail side, withdraw their money, stock would plummet, and by the time you realize that it was inaccurate information, it's too late. But there's the flip side of it, right? Because social media is allowed, I mean, it's allowing you and I to talk right now, the connectivity. But if they were really that bad, I could see them suppressing, say, X, that you can't share information to get, you know, accurate data out there. So it's a catch-22 where we're at.
Absolutely. And we've seen, I mean, when it comes to the oil market in particular, the problem of social media is that we do have problems with two news organizations that publish on purpose. They publish fake news, and then the social media will challenge me. I mean, think about it this way. I'm going to tell this story because I already wrote it on Twitter recently, and I was hiding it for a long time. I was working with one of the OPEC ministers, and we had a meeting with Novak, who is the energy minister of Russia at that time. And the meeting was canceled at the last moment. Yet a very well-known journalist basically was tweeting about what's going on in the meeting and what they are discussing. And there was no meeting.
They were getting a lot of likes, so I bet, right? A lot of clicks, a lot of engagement based upon that.
Yep.
Did you make it public who that journalist was?
I did not make the name, but I wrote the story on purpose because I got fed up with certain groups basically writing fake stories almost on daily basis on OPEC and the oil market. And in a sense, it's frustrating, but it's good for me because I make more business as they publish more fake news.
It brings attention to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
But still annoying anyway. I mean, just publishing this fake news all the time like this. I mean, to give you an example, when OPEC Plus, not OPEC Plus, when the group of 8 in OPEC Plus decided to increase production, those groups basically went really bearish and they start publishing fake news. And our reports basically showed also, hold on just a second, you guys are missing several points. One of the points is that those increases are to the production ceiling for oil that already existed in the market months ago. So how is bearish if there is no new oil in the market? That oil is already in the market. Kazakhstan and Iraq already overproduced, and this is an increase in the ceiling to compensate for that, so to make them legal. So why you guys are publishing those stories? And then they forgot that we have the increase in summer demand because of the increase in demand for cooling, where demand for oil in those countries increases by 1.2 million barrels a day. And therefore, the world is not going to see most of that. And then we have the Hajj in Saudi Arabia, where 3 million people come to a certain place where gasoline and diesel and jet fuel and fuel oil consumption increases substantially. Therefore, the Saudi increase is not going to be that big. And then we lost the Venezuelan or some of the Venezuelan oil because of the Trump tariffs. So that's a compensation. And they ignored, and it's very hard for me to see that they ignored this just because they don't know. I think they ignored it on purpose. In May, when this group of 8 decided to increase production ceiling by 411,000 barrels a day, the exports of the United States, Brazil, Venezuela, and Ecuador declined by 1.1 million barrels a day. That's why prices increased. Basically, OPEC Plus even as a whole couldn't compensate for all of that. We have major losses, and the media kept feeding us those bearish fake stories, and they ignored the other side. And ignoring the facts basically is kind of fake news too, in a sense, because they don't show it.
Where can people find you, doctor?
Um, in general, basically, I am very active on Twitter. In the bio, there are two links to the two publications we have. We have the Energy Outlook Advisors newsletter. That's mostly for institutional investors. We have the daily energy report. The fees for that are really not much, so anyone can afford it, anyone who is trading stocks or interested in the markets. So we have the daily energy report, and we do have the newsletter. And of course, for those who wants to reach me, I do a lot of speaking engagements around the world. For those who are interested in this, either for their board or for their annual investors meeting, they can go to my website, anasalhajji.com, and literally contact me through that.
Dr. Alhajji, I appreciate you coming on, and I really enjoyed this discussion. I look forward to continuing to follow your work, and love to have you back. I mean, everything's changing so rapidly that in a short amount of time, there'll be a lot more to discuss.
Well, definitely, I would be happy to.
Mic
Thank you
drop.
very much.
Mic drop.